This is from almost 4 hours of a Houston town hall, narrowed to the hardest questions in the room: healthcare costs, reparations, and policing. Talarico answers them one by one, starting now.
Thank you, and thank you for your service. The short answer is we can finish the work of President Obama and pass a public option so that every single American has access to the health care they deserve. Because health care is a human right. It is not a privilege. Since we are in church, and because I said BS earlier, if you read our scriptures, if you read the New Testament, what does Jesus spend most of his time doing? It's not, well, you already know, okay. It's not preaching, it's not teaching, it is healing the sick. And in Matthew 25, Scripture says that's how we will be judged and how we will be saved, by healing the sick, by feeding the hungry, by welcoming the stranger, by visiting the prisoner. And this is personal for me. When I was 28, I was running for my seat in the state house. Again, I was running in a Republican district, so I had to do something to change the game. I said I ran an unorthodox campaign. What I decided to do was walk the entire length of my district, from Round Rock, Texas to Taylor, Texas, 25 miles. I walked the whole thing in one day on foot in the Texas heat, and I held town halls along the way. I wasn't worried about my ability to do a 25-mile walk. I was 28 years old, perfectly healthy. I hike Big Bend every year, and it was pretty flat terrain. But halfway through the walk, I started to feel fatigued and nauseous. I figured I was dehydrated, so I just chugged some water. I kept going. I actually threw up a couple times along the walk. Somehow I finished it. When I got home, I figured I just needed a good night's sleep. I went to bed, and I slept for 36 hours straight. My family got concerned. They took me to the ER where nurses checked my blood sugar. I wasn't even sure what blood sugar was. They told me a normal blood sugar is 100 or lower. Mine was 900. I was in a state of diabetic ketoacidosis, which leads to coma and death without insulin. I was in the ICU for 3 days. I was lucky to be alive. The nurses and doctors saved my life, professionals like you. I left the ICU. I went to Walgreens to pick up my first 30-day supply of insulin, this new medicine that I now needed to live. And that 30-day supply cost me $684. I didn't have that kind of money, so I put it on a credit card. And I soon learned that Texans with diabetes were facing the same problem. Many of them, as you know, are rationing and skipping doses because they don't make enough money to afford the medicine they need to live. And so when I won that race and flipped that district, I worked with Representative Tony Rose, with my colleagues in the state house, with Republicans. We took on Big Pharma and their lobbyists, and we capped insulin copays in the state of Texas at $25 per prescription. That is the progress we can make. But as you know better than anybody, we have the highest number of uninsured people in the whole country. So the copay cap doesn't do a lot of good if you don't have insurance. And so we have a deeply broken healthcare system. We have for-profit, private health insurance companies that are sucking the blood out of this healthcare system. And we sometimes sanitize this by talking about premiums rising or people falling off their health insurance. But we should be honest about what ends up happening, and that is people die. People die needlessly. This one big, ugly bill that passed a year ago today, that bill, based on bipartisan estimates, says that it's going to kill 51,000 Americans needlessly every year because of cuts made to health care. We didn't expand Medicaid. Well, not we. Tony Rose and I would have expanded Medicaid in a heartbeat. The Republican leaders of the state have refused to expand Medicaid. And because of that, so many Americans, so many Texans rely on the Affordable Care Act, on those subsidies. And because those cuts have been made to the ACA, we've seen some Texans see their premiums rise $1,000. Some of them are falling off their insurance entirely, and some of them will die because of it. So this is an emergency across the state of Texas. And I think what you're seeing as part of this campaign is people coming together, black, white, brown, rural, urban, suburban, Democrats, independents, and Republicans who are rejecting the extremism and the corruption in our government and who are ready to fight to make sure that healthcare. The cornerstone of the American dream is home ownership. And I was sitting, we have a lot of Gen Z members of our team. The best thing you can do as a candidate is listen to your Gen Z staff because they know what they're talking about. We were developing our housing platform, which you can again check out on our website. And during that discussion, I used the term, some of the older folks here are going to know this term. I used the term starter home. And I got blank stares from every Gen Z member of the team. The idea that you used to be able to afford a home in your 20s or your 30s, it is a foreign concept to young people. And that's because the system is rigged against us. We were told, you look like a young man too, we were told that if we worked hard, and he's laughing, I guess. If we if we were told if we work hard, if we play by the rules, if we study, we could live that dream, and that was a lie. And so I passed a bill in the state legislature to allow us to start building a kind of housing that they use all over the world, smaller complexes for things like condos, which is a great entry point to home ownership. I passed that bill in a Republican legislature, but we also need to go one step further at the national level. We have to outlaw Wall Street from gobbling up all the housing stock in this state and in this country. We have to end exclusionary zoning and the vestiges of redlining so that all of us can benefit from home ownership. This has to be at the cornerstone of our economic vision. Because if you can't own property, it's hard to be able to build wealth generationally. And that is the goal. And so we have more work to do on this, but we are trying to articulate an economic vision where folks who work hard, folks who play by the rules are able to get ahead. That's not the economy we have today. If we're going to rebuild the middle class.
Good evening. My name is Osanla Olamo El. I'm just retired from the state of Texas, and I moved to Lancaster, Texas. My question deals with reparations. I'm a descendant of an enslaved foundational Black American. This country has given reparations and support the state of Israel since 1960, which is the year that I was born. We've also given reparations to Japanese as well. With the onslaught of police brutality of Black Americans here in America, this has been going on for some time now. Do you support reparations, and would you legislate for an anti-Black crime bill?
Thank you. Restoration, repairing past harms is part of my faith tradition. It's part of the values I was raised with. And it's exactly why we need a lot of the policies we've been talking about here to invest in Black communities, to invest in Black Texans, whether it's tuition relief, whether it's home ownership grants, whether it is baby bonds to ensure that we are helping to build that generational wealth. We have to correct the injustices of our past. I talked about Sam Branch, Texas. I don't think I mentioned that Sam Branch is a freedmen community. So we are seeing the reverberations of slavery in modern day Texas all over the place. And until we as a society are committed to righting those past wrongs, of restoring our Black communities, we're never going to be able to get this country back on track. And so we, I think, in this election have a prime opportunity, because not only is this a Senate seat that could determine the Senate majority, but all of you know that if we win Texas with a room that looks like this, that is going to be an earthquake in American politics. It will transform the politics of this nation, and it will allow us to build the political will to be able to repair those past harms. Part of what you asked is about a crime bill. In the state legislature, I had a constituent of mine murdered by the police. His name was Javier Ambler. He was an unarmed black man who was pulled over for not dimming his brights. He told the officers that night that he had a heart condition. They tased him so many times that he died right in front of them. The whole thing was filmed for a reality TV show called Live PD. It's kind of like Cops. I worked with Javier Ambler's family, his sister Kimberly. She and I started to do some digging, and we found that there's an incredible amount of research on these reality TV policing programs, that these programs encourage more violent interactions between law enforcement and their constituents, particularly their black constituents. And so Kimberly and I, we walked the halls of the legislature. We went office to office, Democrats and Republicans alike, and we passed Javier Ambler's law, which bans reality TV policing in the state of Texas. No longer can a reality TV show like Live PD or Cops contract with a law enforcement agency in Texas at any level, local, county, or state. But that same session, Representative Rose, you remember this, the George Floyd Act didn't even make it to the House floor. So while we made progress for Javier, while we made progress in banning these reality TV policing programs, we failed to pass the George Floyd Act, which would have been transformational in ensuring that police officers are actually protecting and serving all of us. And I hope that when we win this seat, when we win a Senate majority, we will be able to pass to protect folks who can't go to battle with these predatory lenders, with giant corporations that are taking advantage of consumers. This is back to the point about getting money out of our politics. The only way we're going to build a government that actually serves us, that serves black homeowners here in Dallas County, is if we limit the influence of those corporate special interests. Because what happens is those predatory lenders, they buy the politicians, and then the politicians rewrite the rules to benefit those predatory lenders at our expense. And so there's going to be, hopefully, when we win the Senate majority, enough political will for us to be able to get that money out of our politics and start reforming our housing policies so it actually benefits those trying to build generational wealth. I mentioned that I was a teacher on the west side of San Antonio. I taught almost exclusively black and brown students. It tells you something about modern day segregation. And my students struggled with generational poverty. It wasn't situational poverty. Their parents are poor. Their grandparents were poor. And, a lot of people like to say that folks should pull themselves up by their bootstraps. But what I saw on the west side of San Antonio is it's impossible to pull yourself up by your bootstraps without any boots. And we should be honest about the fact that white Americans throughout our history have benefited from government policy that helped them build wealth, that helped white families own property, that helped white families go to college. That was government intervention to help them build wealth. Now we want to see that same kind of aggressive intervention to help black families build the same kind of wealth. Because when black families are well off, when black businesses are well off, then black communities are well off. And all communities are well off. We are tied together in this economy. The success of black communities and black homeowners here in Dallas County benefits all of us across the state of Texas. A rising tide lifts all boats, and it's why we need these interventions to correct historical injustices and ensure that we are lifting up, giving boots to those families who are working hard day in and day out, who are trying to pass on a home to their kids, to the next generation. We should have their backs in the United States Senate. I'll just tell you a quick story before we go to the next question. I was in Houston, and I was visiting with airport workers, and I met a woman named Augusta. She's a grandmother. She's caring for 2 of her grandkids. One has autism. She is working 10-hour shifts, cleaning the airplanes that we fly on. She gets in there. She's given 45 minutes to clean the plane. The airline which makes billions of dollars in profit, refuses to turn on the air conditioning on the plane. So Augusta, a grandmother, is working in dangerous heat, rushing to clean that plane as fast as possible. Her wages don't even allow her to put a roof over her and her grandchildren's heads. She is now facing eviction. Augusta works full time. She does hard, grueling, back-breaking work for all of us, and she can't afford to get by. And these are the kinds of stories that I'm hearing all over this state, particularly from Black Texans. And it underscores the need to win this race. There is no substitute for winning political power. We should protest, we should march, we should organize, but most importantly, we have to win power. Because if we don't win power, we can't change any of this. We can't make a difference in people's lives. We can't ensure that Black homeowners here in Dallas County are able to pass on those homes to their kids. That is just one example of why this is unacceptable. I was proud to march in Dr. Opal Lee's Walk for Freedom in Fort Worth for Juneteenth. It was one of the most beautiful celebrations I've participated in the whole campaign. So many Texans showing up, black, white, and brown, all together, marching for justice, marching for progress, marching for freedom. It was a joyous, beautiful thing to see. And I'm so sorry that law enforcement felt the need to shut down a joyous festival for you in this community. It is unacceptable. Law enforcement is here to serve us. It is here to protect us. And too often, we see law enforcement weaponized against Black and brown communities in this state. We have a deeply broken justice system. We have a deeply broken approach to policing. There are folks who are advocating for change, for community policing, for building trust with neighbors on the ground, because that's what keeps us safe. We've seen leaders advocating for resources to address the root cause of crime, right? Poverty, right? Housing instability, mental health, the things that are actually going to keep us safe long term. So what we need are leaders who, one, have a proven track record on this, which I have in the state legislature, and I invite you to look at my track record on issues of law enforcement and justice reform. And we need to make sure that we build a system where everybody has true public safety. And if you can't celebrate Juneteenth with your community, that is not public safety. In fact, it's the opposite, because it's community gatherings like that that keep us safe in the long run. And I think it is so short-sighted for folks to be going after events like that, because if we have law enforcement, if we're spending precious law enforcement resources on a Juneteenth festival, instead of going after people who actually mean to do us harm, then that endangers all of us. And we'll just, and I do want to just mention this. I was in Houston last night, and we had a prayer vigil for Lorenzo Salgado Araujo, who was murdered by ICE on the streets of Houston. Our immigrant community is also facing a similar threat from being over-policed. Every resource going after construction workers like Lorenzo Salgado is a resource that's not going after folks who are actually committing crimes. And so we have to get back to a place where police, where law enforcement, where ICE, where they are actually fighting for public safety, not fighting our communities. And I think that if we win this race in November.
In the Q&A portion of his Houston town hall, State Representative James Talarico fielded some of the hardest questions a candidate can get. The price of prescriptions, who's buying up homes, reparations, and policing. The answers move fast and the claims flew, so let's slow it down and check the biggest ones against the record, fairly, and keep it grounded in numbers. 1 ground rule. These are emotional subjects, and both the questioners and the candidate spoke from real conviction. Our job isn't to judge the feelings, it's to check the facts attached to them. Some claims here are rock solid, some are close with a caveat, and a couple are personal statements we simply can't verify. We'll label each one honestly without spin in either direction. Start where the room started, the cost of staying healthy. A questioner said a 30-day supply of medication cost her $684. Here's the honest label. That's a personal account we can't independently verify, so we treat it as her testimony, not a general statistic. But it points at something real. For people who are uninsured or stuck with high deductible plans, out-of-pocket costs for brand name and specialty drugs genuinely can run into the hundreds of dollars a month. The specific number is hers, the underlying problem is documented. Now the context that keeps it fair. Recent federal law capped insulin at $35 a month for people on Medicare, and independent researchers at Johns Hopkins and KFF confirm out-of-pocket insulin costs fell sharply after the caps took effect. So for many patients, especially seniors, the picture has genuinely improved. The gap Talarico is pointing at is real, but it lands hardest on the uninsured and on drugs that aren't covered by those caps, not on everyone. Here's how the state's largest newsroom framed the event overall. It's a neutral, accurate summary. Talarico spent the session taking direct questions from black voters on exactly these pocketbook issues. That's the setting for every claim in this video, and it's worth anchoring to reporting rather than vibes. Next, who is actually buying up the housing? Talarico raised Wall Street investors buying homes and squeezing families out of the market. This one needs a careful two-part answer. The big institutional firms, the ones that own hundreds or thousands of houses, actually buy a small slice of the market, under 2% of all homes by most estimates. The viral claim that they buy 40+% is simply false, and fact-checkers have repeatedly knocked it down. But don't dismiss the concern, because the fuller number is real. When you count all investors, mostly small landlords owning a handful of properties, they made up roughly a quarter of home purchases recently. In specific neighborhoods, investor buying really can outbid first-time families. So the honest version is, it's not Wall Street mega funds swallowing half the market, but investor competition overall is a genuine pressure on affordability. Talarico's worry is legitimate. The scariest version of the statistic isn't. National outlets covered the town hall as a notable tense event, and that framing is fair to report. A candidate taking unscripted heat on housing and healthcare is news precisely because it's rare. We include the critical framing alongside the supportive ones, so you're seeing the whole feed, not a curated half of it. Now the hardest exchange, reparations, and policing. The conversation turned to police accountability, invoking the case of Javier Ambler, a black man from the Austin area. Here are the documented facts stated carefully. In 2019, Ambler lost his life during an arrest by sheriff's deputies after a long vehicle pursuit. The encounter was being filmed for a television show. The county medical examiner ruled it a homicide. That ruling is a matter of public record, reported by local outlets at the time. And here's the part a fair account must include. 2 former deputies were later indicted, and in 2024 a jury acquitted them of all charges. Separately, local officials faced charges over the handling of the footage. So the case became a national symbol of accountability questions, and yet the courtroom outcome did not produce a conviction. Both facts are true at once, and stating them together is the only honest way to reference it. Talarico's opponents use moments like this against him, and here's one doing exactly that. National Republican groups clip his justice and reparations positions to rally opposition. It's a legitimate part of the debate to show you his stances on repair and policing are genuinely contested, and his critics are organized about making that case. On reparations as policy, let's be precise about where it actually stands. At the federal level, a bill to study reparations has been introduced for decades and remains stuck in committee. It has never passed. Even in California, which went furthest with a task force, the state has not enacted direct cash payments. And Talarico himself framed repair less as a check and more through tuition help, homeownership grants, and baby bonds. So this is a live debate, not an imminent policy. Under all of it sat one number, the wealth gap. This is the statistic that anchors the entire town hall, and it's solid. According to the Federal Reserve's most recent survey, the median white household holds around $284,000 in wealth, while the median black household holds around $44,000, a gap of roughly 6 to 1. Homeownership rates show a similar divide. Whatever solution you favor, the size of this gap is not in dispute. It's official government data. One more piece Talarico raised: predatory lending. The data backs him here. Research from consumer protection groups finds that high-cost payday loans are used at roughly 3 times the rate in Black and Latino communities, with typical fees that translate to sky-high annual rates and a large share of borrowers rolling the debt over. That's a documented pattern, not an anecdote, and it connects directly to the wealth gap he's describing. Supporters point to the practical politics. Talarico has racked up a long list of endorsements from Texas elected officials, including prominent black leaders. That doesn't settle any policy question, but it's a fair counterweight to the shouted-down headline. Within the party, he also has real, on-the-record backing from the communities being discussed. And the candidate ties the whole justice theme back to his own race, framing his opponent as the obstacle. It's a campaign message, not a neutral fact, but it shows how he connects policing and repair to the choice on the ballot. We label it as what it is, his framing, sourced to his own account. So total it up, honestly. Here's the fair scorecard. The $600 drug bill is a personal account, but high costs for the uninsured are real, even as insulin caps have helped many. The Wall Street housing fear is exaggerated at its scariest, real at its core. The Ambler case was ruled a homicide and ended in acquittals, and both belong in the sentence. The wealth gap and predatory lending numbers are solid government-grade data, and reparations remain a debate, not a plan. So what was this town hall? A candidate being asked to his face whether the system he wants to lead has failed the people in that room. On the numbers, many of their grievances check out. On the fixes, the honest answer is that these are hard, contested problems without a single clean solution, no matter who's at the microphone. Because in the end, the measure of a town hall like this isn't the applause or the tense moments. It's whether the numbers hold up when the cameras are off, and whether anyone in power actually acts on them. That's what we'll keep watching. That is our breakdown. Stay with us.